Welcome to the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. I'm Laura DiFrancesco, your host. We're talking all about mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling small businesses, as well as corporate law. We are taking our experience closing over $10 billion of transactions since founding Dean Street Law 5 years ago, and my experience being an M&A and corporate attorney for over a decade and making it accessible to you as an entrepreneur. I hope that this helps you in navigating the complex world of mergers and acquisitions. And also, we're always happy to be a resource for you here at Dean Street Law. You can always apply to work with us through our complimentary consultations linked in our show notes. And a huge shout out and thank you to everyone who's subscribed and left us a 5-star review. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and also leave us a 5-star review. It's one of the best ways to support us as a small business. And also be sure to share with your friends and colleagues on social media, through text, email, or however is easiest. It means the world to us that you're supporting our content and helps us make more to support you in your journey. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. I'm your host, Laura DiFrancesco, author of the book, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, A Legal Guide to Buying a Small Business, and founder of our law firm, Dean Street Law. In addition, I'm the founder of more than 4 other businesses, including where we're located here at Flourish Co-working and Event Space, Ethereal Farms, Laura DiFrancesco LLC with our educational platform and books, and a few more. Today, I'm really excited to share with you our special 50th episode. We are super, super proud of all that we've been able to share thus far. I became a lawyer to be an entrepreneur because law is the fabric of business, and it's so important to understand the legal framework, especially of deal making, because it helps you make informed decisions and position yourself for success, ultimately achieving a higher return on investment. And we're all looking for a win-win scenario. So here I'm sharing the top 50 tips that we have for you on deal making that you can glean from our last 50 episodes. So we're going to go episode by episode. And so if you're interested in learning more and hearing more about that episode, you can tune in. I'm going to be reading a little bit because it's going to be impossible for me to memorize 50 facts and tips just to share with you. But I'm really excited to go through these. I really wanted to create the podcast as well as the book, the course on buying a business, so that I can share the knowledge that I have that I gained through over a decade of deal making. This is so important to me because since I went through the process of going to law school, working in big law, getting to the point of diminishing returns where I felt like I had learned so much from executives and entrepreneurs working on their hardest problems that I had enough knowledge and background to go start my own businesses. I'm very passionate about sharing what I know so that helps you along your journey as well. You shouldn't have to go to law school, work in big law, close $10 billion plus of deals to have insights as to what it takes to be successful in deal making. So that's why I'm very passionate about sharing what I know through all these different resources, our educational platform, podcast, book, courses, and more. So if you like this content, please be sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments, what would you like to see as one of our upcoming episodes? We love to hear feedback from you, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. With that, let's get started. From episode 1, the takeaway is buy a business that aligns with a life that you want, because you'll be living it every day for years. This has been something that I am very passionate about throughout my entire business and career. I have a whole course, a workbook, a workshop, full course on lifestyle design, because truly the life that you have is made up of millions of moments. And ultimately, when you're buying a business and when you're working in a business, it will be your everyday. It will be one of the most influential things on the lifestyle that you live and how you feel and what you do on a day-to-day basis. So yes, the economics are important, but the lifestyle is too. Episode 2, we talked about choose your deal structure early, because asset purchases versus stock purchases impact risk, taxes, and whether the deal is even possible. We chat all about what an asset purchase versus stock purchase is, what are your influences and limitations and how to consider it. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that asset purchases are way better for buyers than stock purchases, but in reality, it's just tools in your toolbox to get a deal done. Next, episode 3, we talked about align your loan strategy early because SBA requirements directly shape your deal terms, timeline, and whether the deal will close. So if you are fundraising, if you're bringing on investors, if you are getting an SBA loan, they will all impact your deal terms. Ideally, you want to have an idea of which path you're pursuing prior to the LOI because your LOI needs to comply with either SBA requirements or investor requirements. So, and also economics as well, right? SBA is a different cost of capital than working with investors, which has a higher cost of capital. Episode 4, we talked about how your leverage is highest before signing an LOI. So get the key deal terms right up front because they're hard to change later. Ultimately, your LOI is the foundation of your entire transaction. And whether it's a negotiated or non-negotiated deal, meaning a competitive or non-competitive deal is what I mean, is going to impact how much you can get done at the LOI phase and how much you want to save for later. It's always strategic, but most deals, each party has more power before the LOI is signed, before they're investing significantly in the transaction and it's becoming sticky than they do once the LOI is signed. Episode 5, you can't eliminate risk in a deal, but you can structure, negotiate, and plan to control it. Risk is inevitable. You're buying a business, you're owning a business. Risk is entrepreneurship in a nutshell. It's most important to understand it, quantify it, plan around it. Episode 6, due diligence is how you close the knowledge gap between you and the seller and protect yourself from buying the wrong business. If you're on the buy side, due diligence is the process whereby the buyer asks questions to assist with the underwriting process. The seller, if they're providing a note or something or have questions about the financial viability of the buyer, will also use that time to do their own due diligence as well. But for the buyer, it's mostly, is this business the business that you think you're buying? Is it in reality? Does it check out? That's super important because you can contract around risks, but ultimately your best hedge of your risks is doing due diligence and doing business with someone who's well-intentioned and who you trust. Episode 7, your legal knowledge directly increases your deal's profitability by helping you structure smarter terms and spot risks early. That's why we love to share what we do, because the more you know, the more that you can structure your deal to set yourself up for success and ultimately increase your ROI. Episode 8, closing success is driven by preparation and momentum. Rushing or waiting until the last minute is what breaks deals down. Now, we have a very different structure at Dean Street Law of how we structure deals. We always work very proactively throughout the deal timeline. When you're working with big law, when you're working with traditional law firms, they're very reactive. It's just the entire way that the system is built. But we've done so many deals, so many deals. And we know what the process is. First, we're going to go through an LOI. Then we're going to go through due diligence, a purchase agreement, ancillary transaction documents, prep for closing, etc. There may be nuances and details within that, but we know the structure. So we're always preparing you for the next step ahead. And we're always internally preparing for the next step ahead so that both parties know what's needed to close the transaction. We do this by structuring our deals very differently. At the outset, we prepare the closing checklist and timeline and the material deal terms list, as well as the due diligence prep list if you are on the buy side, or due diligence preparation letter if you're on the sell side. And so what we're doing is preparing you for the different upcoming phases of the transaction and communicating with the other team what's needed to actually get to closing. And that communication is one of the biggest foundations for success in a smooth deal-making process. Episode 9, the value of conferences comes from intentional networking and follow-up, not just showing up. You can certainly go to conferences, whether they're mergers and acquisitions conferences or ETA conferences, and get a little bit out of it. But the more that you get put into it, the more that you get out of it. And by looking at the registrant lists, finding people you want to meet early on, reaching out to them, following up with people you meet, being intentional with your networking, all of those can help you get more out of the time you spend and the money you spend going to conferences. Episode 10, post-closing success depends on thoughtful integration, especially people, culture, and systems, not just closing the deal. Remember, buying the business, selling the business is just the very first step in the journey together as a buyer and a seller. Most of the time, buyer and seller are working together for a certain period of time post-closing. Either way, post-closing processes, integration planning are really integral for the future success of the business, which is very important to buyer and seller, especially when the seller is providing some sort of retained equity, seller note. They've got some skin in the game. Now, episode 11, deals close when both sides build trust early by showing clarity, responsiveness, and a clear path to closing. We often find that most deals die, honestly, because of lack of momentum, lack of communication, lack of trust. And certainly economics, of course, that's a deal killer as well. But a lot of people say, oh, lawyers kill deals. I just don't see that happening. I see most of the time that someone's throwing out LOIs and they don't actually have a plan to execute, or they aren't sure what's next, or they're not communicating properly. They're just doing what's on their agenda and not communicating that it is a path that both parties are going on together. Episode 12, start preparing your business for sale early because preparation directly increases your exit value and reduces deal risks. Sellers out there, the sooner that you can plan to sell your business, years in advance if you can, is the best. And if you don't have years in advance, the best time is now. The earlier that you plan to sell your business, the more preparation you can do, and that increases your sale price, your multiple, and also your ability to retain that sale price through due diligence. Episode 13, the biggest deal breakers aren't legal, they're bad financials and lack of trust. So verify both early on before going too far. It's really important, whether it's buy side or sell side, that you really have these two foundations in place. And so if there's financial due diligence, make sure that you're hitting that early before investing too much in legal, before getting too much of documentation. Now, that's all if you have the luxury of time. If you don't, that's something you have to weigh and take that risk if that's of your desire. In episode 14, in business, understanding the real issue, not the loudest argument, is what determines outcomes and decisions. Ultimately, friendly negotiations are the quickest, simplest, easiest path to success with the least resistance. Now, sometimes you'll get on the other side with someone negotiating who's kind of negotiating in bad faith. They're either attacking the individual rather than the issue, or they're arguing rudely, loudly, unprofessionally. We try to always de-escalate that because emotions and ego can also be something that sinks a deal quickly. Next, episode 15, a well-structured exit like a put option creates clarity and alignment for both investors and operators from the start. Whenever you're doing business with someone, you want to talk about not only how you plan to do business together, the rules of the road, but also how you can exit your business relationship amicably and positively. With episode 16, real estate can make or break a deal, so you need to evaluate and negotiate it early, not as an afterthought. Negotiating the acquisition of real estate is very different than negotiating the acquisition of a business. And while you're doing both, and if you're intending to do both, it's very important to do them cohesively and together because they highly impact each other. They're very different from one another, but they're highly impactful to one another, both from an economic perspective as well as legal risk and allocation and negotiation. So if you're planning to acquire the real estate, whether that's a option for the future, a right of first refusal, right of first offer, or outright with the sale of the business, you want to make sure that that is ingratiated in your whole acquisition strategy. Same thing on sell side. Episode 17. If a business requires a license, your deal structure and transition plan must ensure continuous licensing or the business cannot operate. As simply put as it can be, you essentially need to make sure that if a business requires a license to operate, that is the queen bee that you protect throughout the sale process. Oftentimes this means potentially a sale stock or an equity stock instead of, Potentially that means an equity sale instead of an asset sale in order to transition that license, but it also may mean key employment agreements or managed service agreements with those license holders as well. Episode 18, employees are critical to deal success, so retention, communication, and incentives must be planned early to protect continuity. We want to make sure that the fundamental aspect of the business, which is not just the revenue and the inventory, but also the people who deliver the business itself, they deliver the services, they take care of the customers, they do the business development, that there's continuity. That's one of the most important fundamental assumptions in the continued performance of the business, is the continued engagement of employees. And so that those are protected through employment agreements or offer letters, whatever the case may be. Episode 19, ownership transfers in LLCs are highly customized, so you must follow both state law and the company's governing documents to complete the deal properly. And the same goes whether it's a corporation or otherwise, but in episode 19, we specifically talk about how membership interest transfers are a bit different. Episode 20, you can't rely on templates to buy a business. Every deal must be deeply customized based on due diligence and deal specifics. I unfortunately see this on the buy side more times than is Molly. Sorry. Fortunately see this on the buy side more times than you could ever imagine. People say, oh, I have this template. Can you just start here and it be way cheaper? And unfortunately, your templates are just not as good as our templates. No matter the templates that I have reviewed, we have templates that are built on over a decade of deal making, battle tested. And while they are quote unquote templates, we have dozens and dozens and dozens of basically a starting point that we choose from for each transaction document. I have buyers or people who send me ChatGPT or AI drafted templates, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrifying. Don't spend $1 using this contract. Other times I see things that they're pulling off the internet or pulling from Stanford templates, and they're just not good. They're not applicable. They're not really meant for this deal. And so we customize absolutely everything. Even the documents that we start from, they are just drastically different from the output that we provide you, because we are looking at hundreds of due diligence documents, the LOI, we're having conversations about transaction terms, and each of those are going into customization of these documents throughout. Next, episode 21, legal fees are driven by deal complexity and scope, so choosing the right structure and transparency up front protects both your budget and your outcome. At Dean Street Law, we provide flat fee, scope of work engagements. Of course, that's going to be different from lawyer to lawyer, firm to firm, so check with everybody you're working with and better understand what's included within that scope of work. Episode 22, preparation and responsiveness in due diligence build trust, maintain momentum, and directly increase the likelihood of closing. When a seller is not responding for 3 weeks, a month to due diligence requests, that delays closing. Now, if it takes a day, 2 days, 3 days to compile the information, that's totally normal. But what we're looking for is for sellers to be as prepared as possible. That's why as soon as we get engaged with sellers, we send them due diligence preparation information so that they can prepare for that process. Episode 23, the purchase price isn't everything. Structuring the full economic deal, including seller notes and adjustment, is what determines real outcomes. Purchase price is the most large and significant, but only one of the economic considerations. You can build or augment that purchase price to the tune of millions, upwards or downwards, when you come to things like working capital adjustment, seller notes, the employment agreements, leases, everything that is involved in the transaction, including the allocation of the purchase price and tax treatment. Those can drastically increase that number by millions. So don't forget that the true economic picture is what's most important. Episode 24, indemnification is about allocating risk fairly between buyer and seller, not eliminating it entirely. It's impossible to eliminate risk entirely. The goal is to properly allocate it. Episode 25, in asset-heavy businesses, Asset value, condition, and transfer complexity directly drive deal structure, financing, and timeline. This is true in any type of business. The different type of assets that you have will directly impact whether an asset sale is even possible or whether an equity sale would be more prudent. And it also impacts how they transfer, because in an asset sale, every different class of assets transfers via different legal mechanisms. A deed transfers real estate, a bill of sale transfers personal property, an assignment of contracts transfers contracts, whereas title to a car transfers vehicles, right? So as you can see, every different class of assets has different transfer mechanisms. Episode 26. Asset-heavy deals require early alignment on valuation, tax impact, and asset scope, or they will delay or derail the transaction. Episode 27, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition is simply buying a business to become an entrepreneur. It's a new name for an old practice. What matters is understanding the risk, not the hype, because there is so much hype out there about this being the new thing to do when it's been around for a really long time. Episode 28, starting a business lets you fail small and learn, while buying a business requires more capital but compresses time and gives you an existing foundation. Episode 29, a well-structured data room protects sensitive information while enabling efficient, organized due diligence. We always help sellers set up their data room for success. We help them determine what information needs to be disclosed, to redact confidential information, and support them throughout the due diligence process. Episode 30, in service-based businesses, value is driven by people, relationships, and contracts, not just physical assets. So due diligence must focus on those as well. I hope that these have been helpful so far. We are over halfway through our top 50 tips. I would love for you to tell me, if you haven't in the comments so far, what's your top tip, what's your top takeaway, and what's your favorite episode that you want to go back and learn more about. When it comes to navigating corporate law, entrepreneurship, and managing small businesses, experience matters. Dean Street Law is a boutique corporate firm specializing in mergers and acquisitions and additional focus in real estate, commercial transactions, finance, and corporate governance. With over $10 billion in deals closed, Dean Street Law has extensive experience representing hundreds of clients in thousands of transactions, from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies. Whether you need startup guidance or advice on closing multi-million or multi-billion-dollar deals, we're your trusted partner every step of the way. Visit deanstreetlaw.com in the show notes to schedule a complimentary consultation. Episode 31, consistent strategic planning and intentional focus are what drive long-term success across your businesses and deals. Strategic planning is part of everything I do every quarter, every week, every decision, every year throughout all of my businesses. And it's something important whether you're selling or buying a business as well. Next, episode 32, understanding the legal process end to end is essential to protect your investment and avoid costly mistakes. This is super important. As I said, education is a tool, information is an asset. Episode 33, escrows and holdbacks are deal-specific risk allocation tools, so their structure should be tailored, not based on generic market averages. A lot of times when you get into negotiations, people say, well, this is what's market, or this is why we want it, when you really have to think, well, what's market? Are you talking about lower middle market deals that are generally $100 million to $250 million? Or are we talking about a $5 million deal? In addition, are we talking about the business's specific risk? The more that you customize these to the actual business at hand, to the actual transaction at hand, the more they're going to make sense for the deal and actually work for you rather than against you. Episode 34. Rollover equity aligns buyer and seller incentive, but it only works well when there is a strong trust and long-term alignment between both parties. It takes a lot to go into business with someone. Most people would not go into business with people even if they would live with someone. because it's an entirely different beast of shared economics, shared risks, shared expectations. So you have to be very careful with who you do business with, and retained equity is one of those, or rollover equity is one of those considerations. Episode 35, non-competes protect the goodwill you're buying, so they must be carefully tailored to be reasonable, enforceable, and fair to both parties, both from a legal perspective as well as fair negotiation and a good way to get to closing. Episode 36, manufacturing deals are complex and asset heavy, so understanding the equipment, working capital, and operational dependencies is critical to valuing and structuring the transaction. Molly is here. I'm not sure, you probably can't see her from the camera, but little Miss Molly, my little buggy, she's my cute puppy, my golden here, is here to join me. Episode 37, post-closing success depends on planning the transition early and executing it in a way that minimizes disruption to operations, employees, and customers. Ultimately, you want closing to be successful, a celebration, but you do not want it to impact operations. You certainly don't want it to impact bank account transactions. You want to make sure that all the closing mechanics are thought through properly ahead of time to make it as smooth as possible for the transition of the business. Episode 38, value is created by aligning strategy with execution, so every action directly drives measurable business outcomes. Episode 39, in healthcare acquisitions, regulatory licensing and transferability constraints drive the entire deal structure and timeline. Most of these are going to be equity purchases due to contracts and transferability of licenses and whatnot. And they're also sometimes entirely dependent on third-party consents, whether those be regulatory consents or contracting party consents. Episode 40, search funds trade autonomy for access to capital and support, requiring strong alignment with investors on strategies, execution, and exit. You always want to make sure if someone's investing in your business that you're aligned from the get-go so that you have aligned expectations and productive conversations. The worst thing that you could do is accept money from someone without understanding that that money comes with opinions and expectations. Especially because as someone accepting funds, you have a fiduciary duty then to the investors, a legal responsibility. Episode 41, proactively addressing key deal terms, diligence, and timelines early is the best way to reduce risk and increase the likelihood of closing. As we said earlier, we like to be proactive in what we do. This is super important to us because we find it directly correlates with your ability to get to closing and the experience that everybody has in their process of getting to closing. Episode 42, clear proactive communication and strong information management are critical to keeping deals moving efficiently and successfully forward. Episode 43, post-closing success comes from prioritizing transition, learning the business first, and mitigating risk through proper due diligence and planning. Episode 44, momentum, clear communication, and realistic timelines are essential to keeping a deal on track and getting to closing. I'm so excited. We only have a few more left. The next is, in government contracting deals, episode 45, understanding regulatory risk, contract terms, and transfer restrictions is critical to structuring and closing the transaction successfully. Similar to healthcare businesses, government contracting businesses also have significant requirements for the transfer of their business. Oftentimes, this will be an equity sale and potentially also subject to third-party approvals. Now, last page, episode 46. In family-owned business acquisitions, maintaining trust through fair terms, respectful communication, and emotional awareness is critical to getting the deal done. You always have to understand, especially in family-driven businesses, but in all businesses as well, who are the decision makers and who influences their decision making. Ideally, you want to get those all aligned to bring it to a successful close. Episode 47, bringing on investors increases access to capital, but requires giving up control, sharing returns, and taking on fiduciary and reporting obligations. We touched on this briefly. And then episode 48, change of control and anti-assignment clauses can determine deal structure, timing, and whether the transaction can close at all. That's one of the most important things that we review in the due diligence process to understand the requirements to get to closing. Episode 49, preparing your business in advance, legally, financially, and operationally, as a seller directly increases valuation and reduces the risk of a deal falling apart. You always want to make sure that you engage with your attorney as soon as possible. We work through pre-sale positioning, pre-sale due diligence auditing, and preparation. Now, finally, tip 50 for this episode. Ultimately, the most important thing to understand is that you can shape the process of buying and selling a business to suit your needs. Almost everything is up for negotiation. So cheers and happy deal making. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and that it brought you one step closer to mastering the art of mergers and acquisitions. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in our discussion, please leave a 5-star review. It would mean the world to us. And share this podcast with your network, friends, and colleagues. For more in-depth resources, be sure to visit our website, deanstreetlaw.com, where you can find articles, guides, and more information on our services. Don't forget to follow us on social media for the latest episodes, updates, tips, and exclusive content. You can find us on LinkedIn, Search Funder, at LMDFrancesco on X, and at Dean Street Law on Instagram. Join us on our next episode where we'll explore more deal-making insights. Cheers and happy deal-making.